Persephone had just returned from her time in the underworld. It had been a few years now since her abduction, and she had discovered her own kind of chthonic power and taken her seat as queen of the underworld. And as it does, the spring came, and as she must, she rose again out of the deep dark. And returned with the Narcissus to the greening, blooming beginning of spring. And it was a warm kind of a day, unseasonably warm, in fact, and had been for about a week or so. And so the snakes were out already, sunning themselves, just emerging of the cold, deep, dark sleep themselves. And there was one particular snake who had his eye on Persephone, who was not really a snake at all, although for sure he was a snake who we know as Zeus. Now, Zeus had had his eye on Persephone for a few years now. In fact, ever since his brother Hades had abducted her. he began to ask himself why his brother should be the only one to taste of her fruits. And so he decided it would be a cunning kind of a thing to turn himself into a snake and to approach this not any more innocent one and court her. And Persephone was no longer innocent, truly, and had her own appetites and desires and longings. And don't forget, she was a goddess in her own right, and so she saw through the ruse of Zeus. But she played along because it was titillating, alluring. And she was in the mood to follow her own lust and her own eros. And so they spent a few delicious hours, Zeus slithering himself along Persephone's entire body. It was a beautiful kind of lovemaking. Out of which she became pregnant. She only said to Zeus, "Please talk with my husband, your brother, and sort this out yourselves." I don't want to have to clean up your mess. And so 9 months later, back in the underworld, she gave birth to a boy, a beautiful, shiny, divine boy, who she named Dionysus. Now you see, Hades didn't really have a problem with the whole situation, but Zeus's wife Hera did. She was tired of Zeus's constant womanizing. And she didn't really want any more children lurking about. And so she set out to take care of what she saw as a problem. And when Persephone came up out of the darkness again into the light, Hera made a show of inviting her to Olympus to welcome the new child. And when they arrived, Persephone and her son Dionysus, Hera placed a curse of madness upon the Titans. And rather than feasting for Persephone and Dionysus, Dionysus himself became feast. And the Titans attacked and went to tear him asunder. Dionysus, still an infant, turned into a young man, turned into an old man, shapeshifted into a snake, shapeshifted into a goat, and then a horse, and then a bull. And as he reached the bull stage of his shapeshifting joy, the Titans fell upon him, dismembered him, and began to consume him. Only his heart, Demeter, his grandmother, was able to save. Zeus, outraged, took a thunderbolt and incinerated the Titans, which, incidentally, out of whose ashes the first humans were made. But that's a story for another time. And so Demeter took the heart of Dionysus and protected it, and held it close, and disappeared from Olympus, away from the watchful eye of Hera, tended her grandchild's heart until it could be safely given to Zeus, who put the heart of his child into a goblet of wine. Now Zeus, in order to solve this problem, began to cast his eye among the women in the area around Olympus. He thought maybe this time he would choose a human woman, so that it might not be such a temptation for Hera to do the child harm. And he found one. Semele was her name. Beauty. Soft beauty. He was allured and drawn to this one. And so he began to watch her, and he began to send her dreams. He sent her dreams of flowers, of intoxicating smells. He sent her dreams of serpents. He sent her dreams of bulls. He sent her dreams of a fruit tree struck by lightning, whose fruit was not harmed. And then he came to her, bringing his flask, his goblet, for the deep red wine in which his son's heart had been dissolved. And he courted Semele with this liquor, this exotic wine, this consciousness-shifting wine. And they drank of it, and she drank of it. And they made love. And she became pregnant with Dionysus. And after their lovemaking, Zeus told her who he really was, revealed his true name, and promised her that her son would be divine. Some months passed, and Zeus doted on her, brought her gifts. So longing was he for his son in his arms. But at some point, Hera, as she must, did catch wind that the Dionysus child was growing within Semele's womb. And so she glamoured herself, shape-shifted her own goddess's shape from a young woman to a crone, one who tends the bedside of birthing mothers. And she began to dote on Semele, and she began to bring her herbs, and she began to cook beautiful, healthful meals for her to help Dionysus grow strong. And she began to gain her trust, began to tell her stories of birthing and prepare her for that which was coming. And then, once she had gained Semele's trust, she began to whisper to her strange doubts. It couldn't possibly be true that Zeus was the father of this child. She must have had lovemaking affairs hidden in some meadow with some shepherd boy that she was trying to disguise. Her making offerings to Zeus every day and her father making offerings was only sparing her own life. Surely Zeus was not the father of this child. Semele was distraught and began to doubt until the moment was ripe, and Hera, in the guise of this old crone, casually said to her, "If it's truly Zeus, you should ask him to reveal himself, to show himself to you with his thunderbolt lightning glory. no other human has ever seen him before. But if he really loves you, as you say, and visits you, then he would do this for you. And so Semele made offerings to Zeus and prayed to him that he would reveal himself to her, that he would indeed prove that he was the father of this child. Now Zeus knew that this would destroy her, very likely, because truly no other human had seen him in his wild, unfiltered form. But she did not let up, and she did not stop doubting until she became sick and weak. And so Zeus, in order to save his child, agreed. And he came to her, thunderbolts brandished. She was in awe, was so allured by the power of the lightning that she reached out her hand just to touch its fiery beauty. And of course, she died. But Zeus cut the child out of her womb and sewed him into his own thigh. And there Dionysus spent the last 2 months of his growing and ripening, until he was born and whisked away by Hermes to the river nymphs in order to hide this one from Hera. But she was hot upon the trail and cursed the river nymphs with madness so that they again would descend upon Dionysus, tearing him to bits. And Hermes was faster, and Hermes grabbed him and took him to Mount Ino. And put into the care of an ancient old woman who brought Dionysus up as a girl in order to hide this one's identity. Years went by. Dionysus learned the rites and rituals of maidenhood and womanhood, belonging to that part of the world. But when Dionysus came of age, he was sent to Chiron for his initiation. And Chiron taught him the rituals and rites of initiation and the plants and herbs that shift consciousness, and how to journey between the worlds. When he had learned all he could from Chiron, he began his long journey. First love came upon him in Egypt as he was learning to make wine. He met a being half man, half goat, and fell madly in love. And they brought beautiful summer together. Tenderness and wild passion. And at the harvest time, they worked in the vineyards together, harvesting the grapes. Amanos, his love, was too reckless and too daring. Climbed too high and reached too far, and one day, as they were out gathering grapes, he fell to his death. Dionysus was shattered in grief and went mad at the loss of his love. So he wandered, years upon years, teaching those to grow grapes and make wine in honor of his beloved. And one day he came to Phrygia, where Cybele lived, known as the great earth goddess. She cured him of his madness. She taught him of the rites and rituals of life and death and rebirth. And so he traveled on. So many journeys and stories to share another time. But he returned to Greece, his birthplace. He returned to Greece with winemaking and ritual knowledge and shape-shifting and consciousness-shifting ways. He, through his grief and his learning and his travels, had become a stranger, had become one who lives outside of all traditions, cultures, at the very heart of the birthplace of the holy and the ecstatic trance journey to become one with that knowing of the divine. And so he would arrive in a town and he would call to the women, he would call to the slaves, he would call to the queer ones. She would call to the women, she would call to the slaves, she would call to the queer ones. Eyoi! 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 Come away. Come with your tambourines. Come to the wine, to the hills, to the dance, to the feast, to the hunt. Come. But often, when he, she, they arrived in a new town and would call, those who heard would be afraid. A lightning bolt of fear would strike their hearts and they would cower and stay indoors. And Dionysus would call again, Eyoi! 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 Come away! And again, if they were held ransom by fear, they would not come. And Dionysus would cause ivy to grow along the walls of their homes, up the doors and windows and in, until the ivy was growing inside along the walls, turning the whole place into a jungle of green. And a third time Dionysus would call, Eyoi! 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 Come away! And if this third time they denied the call, Dionysus would send a madness, a curse of madness, and the women and the slaves and the queer ones would tear apart their families and owners and beloveds. And the story spread. The story spread. So that the next time when Dionysus would call, Eyoi, Eyoi, come away, they would go. They would bring their tambourines. They would bring their drums. And they would head to the hills and the mountains where they would drink the wine journey wine of Dionysus and dance and be taken with a ritual ecstasy and a beauty. And in the climax of this ecstasy, they would go onto the hunt like a wolf pack, like a great gathering of wild cats. They would hunt and with their bare hands catch and tear apart and feast upon the flesh of one in the forest. And they would return home, having tasted of the wine, having tasted of the blood, having tasted of their own arrows and ecstasy. Changed. Changed because filled with some kind of power, some kind of feral power, some kind of uncivilized, holy ruckus. Dionysus travels still through the lands, through our dreams. Yay! They call. Will you come away? Will you come away and dance in ecstasy, in sacred madness, and become one with the divine? Rule breaker, old story breaker, too small life breaker, the one who initiates. Will you come? Yay! You might find yourself dancing now. You might let the images and moments of the story dance in you. Receiving the echo and the follow on.